history of Toyota trucks in America is a tale of success and failure. On the success side, we undoubtedly have the Toyota Tacoma. It's riding high right now, despite being designed practically in the last ice age. Nearly 40% of pickups in America that are not full-size, that would include compact and mid-size, are Toyota Tacomas. Nearly 252,000 units were sold last year. That's 160,000 more trucks than Ford sold of the Ford Ranger. The Tacoma's relative success makes sense when you take a look at Toyota globally because they are one of the largest manufacturer of pickups in the world. But when it comes to the full-size American market, things are quite different. The Tundra accounts for just 3.8% of this segment. In my videos, I don't normally talk about sales volume because I truly believe that it's not a good barometer of how good or bad a vehicle is in its particular segment. But when we're talking about the Tundra, sales volume is important to discuss because the competition outsells this by enormous margins, which is why we find so much more variation in their lineup. More trims, more standalone options, more drivetrain options, more bed and cab combinations, etc. You, for instance, will not find a two-door 8-foot bed version of the Tundra on sale. But obviously, Toyota wants to grow the volume of the Tundra, and that's why they've decided to go outside their usual playbook, and they've made some really big decisions with this model. We now have a twin-turbo V6 under the hood. This particular model bundles that with a hybrid system, and we have more trims than have ever existed in the Tundra, including this top-end capstone trim, because Toyota realized that luxury trucks are definitely hot in 2022. The question on my mind ever since the new Tundra launched is, has Toyota done enough to convince buyers of Ram, Ford, and Chevy trucks that they would do well to head over to the Toyota dealer and give the Tundra a look? Well, partially to answer that question, Toyota has decided to design and build the Tundra in America for this generation. So 100% of this design, including the infotainment system in the dash, was designed right here in the United States. It's also built in Texas. Then on top of that, they decided to give it more room on the inside, more power, more fuel economy, greater towing limits, more gadgets, and more luxury touches. But is any of that enough to convince a Ram, Chevy, or Ford buyer that they might want a Tundra? As you'd expect in a top-end trim, we get a big, bold grille, lots of zigzags and 3D elements going on there, and perhaps a slightly more discreet sort of handlebar mustache thing going on right here. I do think that this front end looks best in the Sequoia, and you might actually be able to swap the Sequoia's front end onto the Tundra because the Sequoia uses the same hood, same quarter panels, and very similar headlights. So it's possible that front end might bolt right on here. But all trims are going to get LED headlights, and you will likely find a grille that you might appreciate a little bit more or less than this because there are a ton of different options available now. Standard driver assistance tech is a key area where the Tundra has a massive lead over the competition. Every version of the Tundra, including the base SR5 trim, is going to have radar adaptive cruise control, autonomous emergency braking, pedestrian detection, their lane centering system, etc. In fact, almost all of the active suite of systems on this top-end truck will also be found standard on the absolute base version of the truck. And that is certainly not the case over at Ford, General Motors, or Ram. Statistically speaking, I assume there are some folks out there that would love to see a Tundra as a regular cab with an 8-foot bed behind. But that number of folks is pretty small, and not even all the American competition offers their latest truck design in that particular format. For instance, if you're looking at a Ram 1500 and you want a standard cab and 8-foot bed, you're actually going to be buying the old pickup truck, not the new one. The new one is 4-door only. And that's exactly why Toyota made the Tundra 4-door only. This is going to come in 3 different lengths because there are 2 different cabs and 3 different beds that you can combine together. You can get the double cab with the short or long bed, the crew cab with short or long beds as well. But the only one available with the 8-foot bed is going to be the smaller of the 2 4-door cabs. While we're looking at the side, let's talk about steps. As you'd expect in a modern top-end truck, we have power running boards. But a cool trick that we find in this particular trim is a power step in the back. The step has a nice and sturdy feel to it, but there's no handle to help you get up into the bed. And once you're up here, I found myself actually tripping over the tailgate wire as I was trying to get back down. If you close the tailgate, then the step automatically retracts. Out back, we have a pretty typical pickup design with a little bit more flair than we find in most of the competition with this sort of double chop look here. Kind of looks like it was cut in right there and then cut in right there below. Unlike some of the competition, no painted metal bumpers back here. So plastic on the outside, plastic right here, but there is a metal bumper underneath that all. You'll find that in the back and up front. Although this is a feature reserved only for the largest cab in the Tundra lineup, we still have the power rear window. I think it's safe to say that as an engineering philosophy, Toyota generally prefers design evolution to design revolution. But they knew that when designing the new Tundra, in order to be competitive, they had to get way outside their comfort zone. And that's why we find some very un-Toyota things happening under this hood. Instead of a naturally aspirated V6 or a naturally aspirated V8, we find standard a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6. This produces 389 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque. We then find a hybrid system, which is the one I'm driving today, that is unlike any hybrid system that Toyota has ever put in a vehicle. This mates a regular old 10-speed automatic transmission behind, also a first for the Tundra, with a pancake electric motor and a clutch unit, and the same twin-turbo V6 under the hood. So when the electric motor is not doing its thing, this still produces 389 horsepower, and when the electric motor is doing its thing, you get 437 horsepower, 583 pound-feet of torque. Some folks have described this hybrid system as a mild hybrid. That is not true because this hybrid system can drive the vehicle forward in electric-only mode. If it were a mild hybrid, it would not be able to do that. However, the fuel economy benefit for this hybrid system is relatively mild. You'll only see an improvement of about 2 mpg over the regular gasoline engine. So this particular model is EPA rated for 20 miles per gallon. If you get the rear-wheel drive model, it goes up to 22 mpg. But you know what's also 22 mpg in the full-size truck segment? An F-250 without a hybrid and the 2.7-liter twin-turbo engine. Admittedly, you'll get less power out of that turbo, 325 horsepower. If you get the F-150 hybrid, which has a hybrid system shockingly similar to this one, you'll get 25 miles per gallon in rear-wheel drive trim, 23 with four-wheel drive. And of course, if you get a Silverado or Sierra diesel, you'll get 30 miles per gallon combined, and a Ram diesel, you'll get 32. As with all trucks, payload and towing capability will vary based on the options and the trim level you select, and of course whether you choose the hybrid model or the non-hybrid model. You'll find the highest payload ability in the short bed SR5 rear-wheel drive model with the smallest cab available. That will give you 1,940 pounds of payload ability, notably less than we find in the highest payload forms of the F-150, but pretty similar to what you'll find for the average entry-level truck in America. Max towing, that's going to come in at around 12,000 pounds maximum, depending again on the trim that you get. As close as I can estimate for this particular truck, because Toyota makes it a little bit harder than, say, Ram to actually divine what this particular truck is capable of. Payload in this model is on the door sticker. That's 1,300 pounds for this model, pretty similar to a lot of top-end trucks, and towing appears to be right around 10,000 pounds. After a week of driving this top-end capstone trim, I found the front seats to be very comfortable, but they're not quite as adjustable as some of the entries. We do, however, have a powered tilt telescopic steering column, something that we don't find in all the competitive trucks, and it is memory linked to the 2-position memory on the door. Jumping into the back, you'll find tons of legroom, about 12 inches on either of the outboard positions. But there are a few odd twists back here. If I move to the middle seat, I find less headroom than I had expected, actually less than we find in most of the other competitors here. I can't really put my head back there to the headrest. Headroom is just a bit too limited. Also, there's a pretty pronounced driveline hump back here, something that we really don't find in the American competition. Scooting all the way over to the right side of the truck, the front seat moves quite far back in its tracks. So if you're a taller person up front, there is plenty of room for you, and even still for an adult to sit behind them. I still have about 4 inches of legroom left. The rear seats flip up like that, but because this is the hybrid model, the battery pack is located right down there, so there's no additional storage. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that I am in the capstone trim, and we have this little warning over here because this is a pre-production prototype, so not everything in here may be quite right. We do have this large panoramic moonroof that extends to just over the rear passenger's laps. The driver and front passenger get height adjustable shoulder belts. One surprising touch though, just 2-way adjustable headrests. I had wished these were a little bit more adjustable. Perforated seats front and rear, because in this trim, both the front and rear seats are heated and ventilated. That two-tone theme continues onto the front doors, where we find greatly improved plastics versus the last generation Tundra. Still some hard plastics down there along the bottom of the door, but in this trim we get real wood trim, lots of stitched materials, and lots of soft touch materials as well. The dashboard is common with the new Sequoia. We have a hard plastic insert right there just atop of the passenger section, then real wood trim. It's a little bit hard to tell, but there is actually an illuminated capstone logo right inside that black piece right there. Then stitched goods lower than that, harder plastics lower, and a pretty big bin-style glove compartment, but not the dual sort of glove compartment that we find in other pickup trucks. In the middle of the dashboard, we find a large, just over 14-inch touchscreen system. This is, I have to say, one of the largest implementations of Apple CarPlay I have ever seen. It's definitely easy to use as far as that CarPlay interface. The rest of the interface, it's kind of a mixed bag, because this is connected navigation software, so if you are in an area, say in the country, where you don't get a good cell signal, the nav system is not going to be doing anything for you. Or if you like to take your truck a little bit further off the beaten path, keep in mind that in national parks, etc., the connected services won't function as you might expect. We do, however, have streaming audio integrated right into the system, so you can either use Apple CarPlay, or you can actually go over here to sources and say use Amazon Music or Apple Music. Now, a lot of these services are going to require a subscription after the free trial period, so keep that in mind. Also, you should know the base screen is a considerably smaller 8-inch touchscreen, not this large 14-inch one. Below that, we have the controls for the automatic climate control system. You'll find controls for the heated and ventilated seats right there. Then below that, we have a bank of toggle switches. This is for the trailer backup assist feature. It's not quite the same level of backup assist that we find in some of the competition, but it is still handy. Button for the 360-degree camera system with augmented reality, so you can see it gives you that rotating view of what's around the car as if you're sort of a bird flying overhead. We then have controls for the rear air suspension. This is not a four-corner air suspension like we find in the Ram, but you can raise and lower the rear end of the vehicle to help you connect a trailer. Over here we have the automatic brake hold, parking brake button, large Qi wireless charging mat, lots of real wood trim going on in here. Under here we find two large cup holders, pretty traditional console shifter there. The controls for the part-time four-wheel drive system, so no 4 auto mode, drive mode controller, tow haul mode, and then here we have a pretty large center console, more real wood. You can move this section of that in so you can have easy access to this large center console storage bin, but it's not quite as large as some of the competition. Again, I'm not entirely clear what is in this large hump, but that large hump that runs from the rear area through this area definitely seems to eliminate some storage. Back there, we have 2 cup holders for the rear passengers. On the driver's side, there's an available full-color LCD heads-up display, and then we have a large 12-inch LCD instrument cluster in this particular trim. This is not standard, but you are going to find it on all of the upper-end trims. The theme of this display doesn't change too much from one drive mode to the other, really just the color of this dial changes. And unlike some of the competition, it's never going to give you a moving map display. Zooming out from there, we find the latest pickup truck steering wheel from Toyota. Expect to see this on the upcoming Tacoma as well. Over here, we find controls for that multifunction LCD cluster. No paddle shifters on the back of the steering wheel. I would love to see that out of some truck manufacturer. And then over here, we have the controls for the standard radar adaptive cruise control system. If you're looking for the trailer brake controller, it's over here right under the power button. Because there's less variation in the Tundra lineup in terms of drivetrain options, axle ratios, etc., it's a bit easier to talk, generally speaking, about the Tundra and how it fits into the truck segment. With an F-150 or a Ram 1500 or a Silverado, there are so many engine, axle, transmission combinations, etc. It's really difficult to talk about those trucks as if they were just one monolithic item. On the Tundra, however, it is a little bit easier. This model went 0 to 60 in 6.1 seconds. I was really surprised by that. That is half a second slower than the F-150 hybrid. This model stopped from 60 miles an hour back to 0 in 130 feet. That was a little bit longer than I had expected. It's a little on the long side for a pickup truck that doesn't have all-terrain tires on it, and these tires are a little bit more road-focused. I think that has to do with the curb weight. This particular model is a little over 300 pounds heavier than the F-150 hybrid. Now, the F-150 hybrid is a majority aluminum construction vehicle, and that is going to have pros and cons. Obviously, it's going to be more expensive to repair. If you do bop a body panel, aluminum is more expensive, but it does have the effect of being lighter, and Ford returns a lot of the weight that they have removed in terms of payload and towing ability back into that truck. So the more weight you can take out of the structure of the truck, the more you can put right back in terms of payload. There are very few trucks that I would call overtly sporty, but the extra curb weight, the suspension design, and the suspension tuning in the Tundra make this sort of mid-pack when it comes to handling ability. You will certainly find trims of the competition that are not going to handle as well as the Tundra, but you'll find a reasonable number that will feel a little bit more confident. It mainly has to do with the way the rear suspension is tuned. Sometimes it can get upset over broken pavement, especially in the corners, and that's something that we don't find in the Ram 1500 or the latest versions of the F-150. Sometimes that can happen in the Sierra and the Silverado, but not in the top-end trims, which would be the corollary to this Capstone model that I'm driving. Although I'm only driving the Capstone today in this video, last week I was in Dallas and I was able to drive all of the different variants of Sequoia back to back. And you will certainly notice a ride quality difference between the models with the adaptive suspension and those without. If you're looking for a truck that rides a little bit more like a large SUV, you're going to want the top end trim with the adaptive dampers and the load leveling rear axle. You're also going to want the load leveling rear axle if you do a great deal of towing and hauling, because it's going to help return the suspension to its middle position and it's going to perform much better better in terms of handling and driving dynamics than a regular steel spring suspension where it would be sagging in the rear with that additional weight. When it comes to the actual ride quality score, I'm going to give this a B because the Ram 1500 does ride better in all versions. With the coil spring suspension, with the adaptive air suspension, etc., you're going to notice a more compliant ride. In this vehicle, the rear suspension can still get a little bit upset over broken pavement. I'm going to stop for the wildlife there every now and then. But it does come across as more sorted than the outgoing Tundra, unfortunately a little bit less sorted than the F-150. As with most pickup trucks, you'll notice the difference in ride quality the most when the truck is unladen and you're, say, on broken pavement or driving through a pothole right like that. But at the moment, I do have 750 pounds in the bed, and that really does improve the ride quality. So if you frequently run around fully loaded, it is going to improve the ride in the Tundra. As you'd expect in a body-on-frame pickup truck, the cabin is definitely quiet. I measured 70 decibels at 50 miles an hour in here, easily getting this an A when it comes to the cabin noise score. When it comes to fuel economy, I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed. Now, even though this is a pre-production prototype, Toyota says that this drivetrain and its software is 100% production. So this should be representative of a production Tundra in terms of fuel economy. Over a week of mixed driving, without towing, I was averaging about 20 mpg. So that's not too bad. That is definitely above what we found in the last Tundra. Fuel economy in that model was pretty darn low, maybe around 14, 15 miles per gallon in the same sort of driving cycle. This is a significant improvement. However, you will get better fuel economy in the F-150 hybrid, even though it doesn't quite meet its lofty EPA goals either. What surprised me about that is that even in slow and go and stop and go driving, where hybrid systems normally really excel, this was still averaging around 18 or 19 miles per gallon. Out on the open highway, going about 60 miles an hour to 65 miles an hour, that's where this was getting better fuel economy than in stop and go traffic. So it is a little bit different than most of Toyota's hybrids, likely due to the hybrid system design. So even though this is operating in electric only mode in those, stop and go, slow and go kind of situations, and going down this hill, the engine is turned off right now, you will notice that it's not going to represent as big of a fuel savings as Camry to Camry hybrid or RAV4 to RAV4 hybrid. For a lot of folks, the best way to think about this hybrid system is not as the most efficient version of the Tundra, because the difference may not be enormous depending on your driving situation. If you're doing a lot of highway driving, probably not going to notice much of a difference. A lot of stop and go city driving, you're going to notice a little bit of a difference, but probably not enormous. But if you do a lot of hauling or towing, or you simply want the fastest Tundra, then you are going to notice a difference, because this certainly feels peppier, more eager, more sure-footed as far as the amount of power you have available to you than the regular Tundra without the hybrid system. 48 horsepower may not sound like a lot, but it's that nearly 200 pound-feet of torque, the torque fill that it gives you, etc., as the transmission is shifting, that is going to be noticeable if you're pulling those heavier weights up a steeper grade. Now, even though the battery pack will eventually become exhausted, you are still going to notice that in a lot of towing situations, and it's going to make the average towing endeavor just feel a little bit more cohesive. As far as on-the-road driving dynamics, I think Toyota has done exactly what they needed to do with the new Tundra. They've certainly made it faster, they've made it more exciting, they've made it tow and haul better, and the new 10-speed automatic transmission is absolutely excellent. The close ratio spread is something that a lot of folks laughed at, I guess you could say, when they started putting 8-speed or 10-speed automatic transmissions in the competition, but there really is a reason for all these gear ratios, and you don't need a diesel engine in order to enjoy them all. If you're towing heavier weights, especially up steep mountain climbs, you're really going to notice the difference. You're going to notice that this engine always has the right gear ratio available for it. That's also something that we see in the GM trucks and the Ford trucks with their 10-speed automatic transmissions, and to a slightly lesser extent, the Ram truck with its 8-speed automatic. But any way you slice it, a significant improvement over what we saw in the last generation Tundra. When it comes to the hybrid system, things could be a little bit different. As long as you're looking at this hybrid system as the range-topping engine, the most powerful engine option, the most capable as far as towing and hauling, etc., then I think you're going to be very well pleased. If, however, you are expecting that sort of classic Toyota hybrid fuel economy, you're probably going to be disappointed, and you're going to want to shop elsewhere. If you're looking for my deep dive into pricing and comparisons, you're going to find that in part 2 of this video. Just watch all the way to the end, click the option on the lower right-hand corner of your screen for the pricing and comparison section, or of course, click the link down there in the description of this video. You'll find those over there because honestly, Google and YouTube are fiddling with their algorithms, and they've basically forced our hand here, and we have to separate these episodes out because of the amount of people that just don't seem to be too interested in pricing and comparisons. They're more interested in everything that has just come before. So to try and please everybody, we're splitting things off into 2 separate videos. Be sure and click that. Find us over at the social media channels, all those other places. Hit the subscribe button, of course, if you haven't already done so, and I'll see all of you next week.